Daniel Rios stood in front of the tall gray building with a single bag hanging from his shoulder. The building didn't look special. No glass walls, no shiny logos, no welcoming decorations. Just concrete, steel, and windows that all looked the same. But this was his new home. And if the papers in his bag were true, it was more than just an apartment. He adjusted his glasses and looked up once more. The government had called it housing for special recruits. He wasn't sure what special meant. All he knew was that last month he had been a normal engineer, repairing satellites and building cheap drones for private companies. Then came the letter. It didn't explain much, just that his skills were needed for a critical project and that his life would change. He sighed, pushed the heavy door, and stepped inside. The lobby was empty. No guard, no receptionist, just a long corridor with smooth white walls and a faint humming sound, like electricity flowing through hidden wires. His footsteps echoed as he walked to the elevator. When the elevator doors opened, he saw something strange. A woman was already inside. She stood perfectly still, holding a small cleaning cart. Her uniform was spotless, her dark hair tied neatly, and her eyes looked too sharp, too focused for a simple housekeeper. "Good evening, Mr. Rios," she said before he pressed a button. Daniel blinked. Do I know you?" She tilted her head slightly. "Not yet. But I know you. My name is Lyra. I'm assigned to your quarters." Daniel hesitated. "Assigned? Wait, you're like the apartment's cleaner?" "I am your housekeeper," she said with a small smile. "I will take care of your living space. Cooking, cleaning, organizing, anything you need." Her voice was calm, too calm. Daniel nodded slowly, unsure if he should laugh or be worried. "Right. Okay, nice to meet you, Lyra." The elevator rose silently. Daniel couldn't stop himself from sneaking glances at her. Something about her posture, the way she didn't move, the way her eyes never blinked too often. It didn't feel normal. The doors opened at the 12th floor. Lyra stepped out first. She moved like she already knew the place. Daniel followed, his curiosity growing. The apartment door slid open as if it recognized him. Inside was a surprisingly warm space. Wooden floors, soft lights, and a faint smell of fresh linen. Much nicer than the cold lobby. Lyra gestured toward the living room. "Your belongings have been delivered earlier. Your bedroom is prepared." Daniel put his bag down. "Thanks, do you live here too, or I will remain close," she said. "My quarters are connected through the service hall. You will not notice me unless needed." Daniel scratched his head. "All right, that's good, I guess." For the rest of the evening, things felt normal. He explored the apartment, cooked some instant noodles. Though Lyra offered to cook, he refused, saying he wanted to test the kitchen himself, and then unpacked his things. Lyra moved quietly in the background, organizing books on shelves and wiping invisible dust from the counters. By midnight, Daniel was exhausted. He dropped onto the bed, pulled the blanket over himself, and closed his eyes. For the first time in weeks, he felt like maybe life was finally settling into something stable, but he was wrong. Sometime in the middle of the night, Daniel woke up. At first, he didn't know why. The room was dark. The clock showed 2:47 a.m. and everything was quiet. He turned over and froze. Someone was on top of him. Daniel's heart jumped. He tried to push back, but a hand pressed firmly against his chest, holding him down. His eyes adjusted to the dark and he saw Lyra's face above his. "Don't move," she whispered. "What the hell are you doing?" Daniel hissed. His voice shook between fear and anger. "Get off me!" Her eyes glowed faintly, just for a second, as if some hidden light had flickered inside them. "If I move," she said, "you will die." Daniel's blood ran cold. He didn't know if she was threatening him or warning him. He opened his mouth to shout, but then he heard it. A sound, soft, faint, like fabric sliding across the wall. Someone else was in the room. Lyra pressed him down harder, her head turning toward the corner of the ceiling. Daniel followed her gaze and his breath caught in his throat. There was a shape up there, a shadow that didn't belong to anything. It moved slowly, stretching like smoke against the wall. "What? What is that?" Daniel whispered. Lyra's eyes never left the shadow. Her voice was low but steady. "An intruder." Daniel swallowed hard. "Intruder? That's not a person." "No," Lyra agreed. "Not a person. Something else." The shadow twitched, then disappeared into the wall. The air grew colder. Daniel shivered, his heart hammering in his chest. Lyra slowly eased her weight off him but kept one hand ready as if protecting him. Do you understand now why I was here? Daniel sat up, still shaken. No, I don't understand anything. What was that thing? Why is it in my apartment? And why are you acting like you knew it would come? Lyra finally turned to face him fully. In the dim light, her expression looked almost human, but her eyes betrayed something more. Because it has followed you, she said. From the moment you were chosen. Daniel stared at her, speechless. Chosen? For what? Lyra stood, her movements precise. I will explain. But for now you must not sleep again tonight. They will return. Daniel rubbed his temples, trying to process. He had come here expecting a new job, maybe a quiet life. Instead, his so-called housekeeper had just pinned him down to save him from a shadow that should not exist. And now she was saying it was only the beginning. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed. Wide awake, his mind racing. He glanced at Lyra, who stood by the door like a sentinel, eyes scanning the room with unblinking focus. Finally, he found his voice. Who are you really? Lyra's lips curved into the faintest, most unreadable smile. I told you. I am your housekeeper. But that is only half the truth. Her words hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. Whatever this new life was, it was not going to be simple. Daniel sat at the small kitchen table, his head resting on his hands. The sun had risen, but he had not slept since the strange event in the night. His coffee sat untouched. Every sound in the apartment felt too sharp. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the wall clock, even his own breathing. Lyra moved quietly around the kitchen. She was not cleaning now. She was preparing breakfast. Every motion she made was precise. The knife cut vegetables into even slices. The pan heated at exactly the right temperature. The bread toasted without a second wasted. It was almost mechanical. Daniel watched her for a while, then finally spoke. So, are you going to explain what happened? Or are you planning to pretend that was just a bad dream? Lyra placed a plate of eggs and toast in front of him. Her expression was calm, but her eyes held something heavy, like a secret she had carried too long. It was not a dream. What you saw was real. Daniel let out a bitter laugh. A shadow crawling on the wall? That's not real. That's something from horror movies. It is real, Lyra said firmly. It was an intruder from outside this world. Daniel stared at her. He wanted to argue, to call her crazy, but deep inside he knew the truth. He had felt the chill, the wrongness in the room last night. No dream had ever felt like that. Lyra sat down across from him. Her voice lowered. You need to understand. The government did not move you here only for work. You were selected, watched, marked. Marked? Daniel repeated. Yes, she said. The beings you saw. They test humans. They search for weaknesses, but they also search for possibilities. Daniel frowned. Why me? I'm just an engineer. I build drones and fix wires. I'm not special. Lyra tilted her head slightly, studying him. That is what you believe. But you carry something rare. Resistance. Most humans cannot even see them. You saw it clearly. That means you are different. Her words sent a shiver down his spine. He remembered the way the shadow had twisted, the way it had seemed surprised that he noticed it. Daniel pushed the plate away, appetite gone. Okay, let's say I believe you.
What are these things?
Aliens, ghosts? Lyra hesitated for a moment before answering. They are not ghosts. They are not the kind of aliens you imagine either. They exist in a space between. Some call them watchers, others call them thieves. They do not invade with ships or weapons. They invade minds. Minds? Daniel asked. Yes. They slip into human thoughts, shape decisions, push history in small ways. Wars, accidents, collapses. Sometimes they guide these events. Sometimes they only watch. We do not know why. Daniel leaned back in his chair. And the government knows about this? Lyra nodded. For decades. They created the Sentinel program, machines like me disguised as simple helpers. We are placed near chosen humans. Our mission is to protect you. Daniel rubbed his temples. So you're not just a housekeeper. I am more than that, Lyra said. I was built to guard you. For a long time, silence filled the kitchen. Daniel tried to absorb everything. It felt impossible. Yet everything about Lyra made sense now. The way she spoke, the way she moved, the way she had pinned him down last night. Finally, he asked, why didn't anyone tell me? Why keep me in the dark? Lyra's gaze softened, almost human. Because knowing makes you a target. The less you knew, the harder it was for them to notice you. But after last night, they know. You saw them. They will return. Daniel's stomach turned. He didn't want to believe her, but the fear in his chest told him she was right. That night, Daniel couldn't bring himself to sleep. He sat on the couch, scrolling through the television channels. Everything looked normal. News anchors talking about politics, ads for phones, reruns of old shows. The normal world seemed too distant now. Lyra stood near the window, watching the street below. She looked almost like a statue, motionless, eyes glowing faintly when the light from passing cars touched her. Suddenly, the lights in the apartment flickered. Once, twice, then went dark. Daniel jumped. Power cut? No, Lyra said sharply. They are here. The air grew heavy. Daniel felt his chest tighten, his thoughts blur. It was like trying to think through fog. He stood quickly, panic rising. What's happening? They are pushing into your mind, Lyra said. Fight it! Daniel staggered, gripping the back of the couch. He heard whispers, faint and sharp like voices pressed against his ears. Join us, sleep, forget. He shook his head, shouting. No, get out of my head! Lyra moved swiftly, placing her hand on his shoulder. A pulse of warmth spread through him, clearing the fog. The whispers faded. Daniel gasped for breath. What did you do? I reinforced your mind shield, Lyra explained. I am connected to you. As long as I am near, they cannot take you fully. Daniel swallowed hard. Fully, you mean they could control me? Yes, Lyra said. Or erase you. Daniel's blood ran cold. He glanced toward the dark corners of the room. For a moment he swore he saw the shadow again, watching. Lyra's voice was calm but firm. They will not stop. They have marked you. That means you are important. Too important for them to ignore. Daniel pressed his fists against the couch. Then I need to know everything. If I'm part of this, I can't just sit here like a scared kid. Teach me. Show me how to fight them. Lyra studied him carefully. At last she nodded. Very well. But understand, this is dangerous. Once you step forward, there is no return to a normal life. Daniel looked around his quiet apartment. After last night, he knew there was no normal left. He clenched his jaw and met her gaze. Then I'll step forward. The next few days were unlike anything Daniel had ever lived. Lyra trained him, not with weapons, but with focus. She taught him how to resist the whispers, how to keep his thoughts sharp, how to recognize when the shadows were near. At first, Daniel struggled. His mind wandered easily, and the shadows pressed harder when he was weak. But each time, Lyra stood by him, guiding him back. Your strength is not muscle, she told him one night as they sat facing each other on the floor. It is clarity. They thrive in confusion. You must become a wall they cannot climb. Daniel practiced every day. He learned to breathe slowly, to focus on a single point, to shut out distractions. The more he trained, the less the whispers could reach him. But with every victory, the attacks grew bolder. One night, Daniel woke to find symbols scratched into his wall, spirals, lines, and strange shapes that burned when he looked at them too long. Lyra examined them closely. These are markers. They are testing your boundaries. Soon they may try to take you physically. Physically, Daniel repeated. Yes, abduction. It has happened before. Daniel's chest tightened. He thought of the stories he had once laughed at. People claiming to be taken by aliens, people no one believed. Now he realized they had been telling the truth. Then we stopped them, he said firmly. Lyra looked at him with something almost like pride. Good, you're ready to see the files. What files? She led him to the study. At the desk, she touched a hidden panel. The wall slid open, revealing a small compartment filled with drives and documents. These are from Sentinel Protocol, she explained. Records of encounters, evidence collected, names of chosen humans. Daniel picked up one file. His heart pounded when he saw his own name printed on the first page. Under it, a single line stood out. Subject shows high resistance. Possible key to counter-influence. Must be protected at all costs. Daniel sat back, his head spinning. Protected at all costs. The government had known about him long before he received the letter. His entire life had been under watch. Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder. Now you understand. You are not here by accident. You are here because humanity needs you. Daniel's throat felt dry. He stared at the file, at the evidence, at the truth. The shadows were real. The government knew, and he was at the center of it. That night, Daniel lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling. He no longer felt like an ordinary engineer. He felt like a soldier standing at the edge of a battlefield he couldn't yet see. Lyra sat by the door, silent and watchful. When Daniel finally spoke, his voice was steady. "If they're testing us, then maybe it's time we test them back." Lyra's eyes glowed faintly in the dark. "Then prepare yourself. The real war has not yet begun." Daniel Rios no longer looked at his apartment as a home. It was a station, a base, maybe even a cage. Every corner now felt like it carried secrets. The walls, the lights, even the air vents. He wondered how much of it was normal and how much was part of the Sentinel program. Days turned into a strange routine. He worked on his assigned engineering projects by day, designing compact drone systems that were said to be for defense research, but every night he trained with Lyra. She pushed him hard, teaching him how to focus his mind, how to keep his thoughts sharp, how to sense when the shadows were near. He had changed in just a week. He ate differently, slept less, and carried a constant tension in his chest. He felt stronger, yes, but also uneasy, like a man preparing for a storm he couldn't see. One evening, after a long session of mental training, Daniel dropped into the armchair, sweat dripping from his forehead. "I don't get it," he said between breaths. "Why me? Why not soldiers? Why not scientists who already know this stuff?" Lyra stood near the desk, her hands clasped in front of her. She looked calm as always, but her eyes seemed heavier than usual. Because soldiers fight with weapons and scientists fight with logic. But this war is different. The enemy fights in the mind. Few humans can resist them. "You can." Daniel shook his head. "It still doesn't make sense. There must be hundreds of people better suited than me." "There are not," Lyra said simply. Her tone made Daniel stop arguing. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "Fine, then tell me everything. No more half-truths. What are they? What do they want? Why am I so important?" Lyra was silent for a moment, as if deciding whether to speak. Then she walked to the desk, touched the hidden panel, and opened the compartment of files again. "You're ready," she said. Daniel sat up straight. Lyra pulled out a drive and slid it into the desk's console. The screen lit up with lines of encrypted text, photos, and strange symbols. A logo appeared on the screen. Sentinel Protocol. Daniel leaned forward. "This is the program, right? The one you keep talking about?" "Yes," Lyra said. "And inside it is the truth you asked for." The first file opened with images of black and white photographs. Men in military uniforms, scientists in lab coats, and blurry shapes in the sky. Some of the photos looked decades old. 1947, Lyra explained. First confirmed contact. Humans thought it was a crash, but it was not. It was a probe, a test. The beings you saw, our enemy wanted to measure us. Daniel clicked through the photos. Strange wreckage, burnt fields. Then he froze at one photo. A group of people standing in a circle, eyes blank, faces emotionless. "What happened to them?" he asked. "They were taken," Lyra said softly. "Their minds erased. Returned as empty shells." Daniel swallowed hard. "So they feed on us?" "Not in the way you think," Lyra replied. "They feed on influence, control, they shape thoughts. They remove choices. To them, humans are tools." Daniel clicked to the next file. It showed long reports with red stamps. Classified, do not release. The reports spoke of shadow entities, cognitive intrusions, and phase interference. "What's phase interference?" Daniel asked. Lyra leaned closer. "The shadows cannot fully exist in this world. They slip between. That is why they appear as shapes, why they move through walls. They are not fully here. They anchor themselves by attaching to human minds." Daniel frowned. "So if they control people, they can stay longer?" "Yes," Lyra said. "And the stronger the mind, the stronger their anchor." Daniel sat back, his chest tightening. "So that's why they want me? Because I can resist them?" Lyra nodded. "Resistance makes you dangerous to them, but it also makes you valuable. If they can take you, they can turn your strength into their weapon." Daniel's stomach twisted. He remembered the whispers in his head, the cold touch on his thoughts. He had fought it off, but what if he had failed? He turned back to the files. More reports appeared, showing locations of incidents across the world. Strange lights, disappearances. Entire groups of people reporting the same dream on the same night. Daniel's hand shook as he scrolled. All this time, People thought aliens were just stories or jokes. And the government, they knew. They knew, Lyra said. Daniel slammed his fist against the desk. Then why keep it secret? Why not tell the world? Because panic would destroy more than the shadows ever could, Lyra answered calmly. Humans are not ready, but soon they may have no choice. As Daniel sat in silence, trying to process the weight of the files, the lights flickered again. Both he and Lyra froze. Not again, Daniel muttered. The air grew heavy, pressing down on his chest. The shadows had returned. Lyra's voice was sharp. Focus, do not let them inside. Daniel closed his eyes, breathing deeply. But this time the whispers came stronger. You are ours. You were chosen, surrender. His head throbbed. The room spun. He gritted his teeth, shouting in his mind, no. You don't control me. Lyra moved quickly, placing both hands on his shoulders. Energy surged through him, warm and steady. But then behind her, Daniel saw movement. The shadow was larger now. No longer a vague smear, but a tall, thin figure with long arms stretching toward them. Daniel's breath caught. Lyra, behind you! She turned swiftly, her hand glowing with a strange blue light. She thrust it forward and the shadow shrieked, twisting violently before slamming against the wall. Daniel's eyes widened. What was that? What did you just do? Lyra didn't answer. Her focus stayed on the shadow, which began to pull itself back together. They are testing us, she said. They want to know how strong you are. Daniel felt his anger rise. He grabbed a heavy lamp from the desk and hurled it at the shadow. The lamp passed through, but for a second the shape flickered. Daniel shouted, If they're testing us, then let's show them we're not weak. Lyra glanced at him, surprised by the fire in his voice. Then she nodded. Together they pressed forward. Lyra's blue energy clashed with the shadow's darkness, while Daniel kept shouting, focusing his thoughts, refusing to let the whispers in. Finally, with a burst of light, the shadow collapsed, vanishing into nothing. The apartment fell silent. Daniel dropped into the chair, gasping. We beat it. Lyra stood still, scanning the room. Her eyes dimmed slowly. For now. But this was only one. They will send more. Daniel wiped sweat from his forehead. Then we'll fight more. Lyra turned to him, her voice soft. Do you see now why you were chosen? Daniel nodded slowly. He wasn't sure if he was ready for this war, but he knew one thing. He couldn't walk away. Later that night, Daniel returned to the files. He searched for his own name again. The document revealed more than before. Subject: Daniel Rios. Genetic markers indicate resistance to phase interference. Potential leader class candidate leader class. Daniel stared at the words, his heart racing. They didn't just want him as a test subject. They wanted him as a leader. He turned to Lyra. Leader class? What does that mean? Lyra met his gaze. It means you are not only resistant. It means others may follow your strength. If you stand, they will stand with you. That is what the shadows fear most. Daniel sat back, speechless. The weight of those words pressed down on him. He had never thought of himself as a leader. He had always been the quiet one, the man behind machines, not in front of people. But maybe that was why he had been chosen. As the night grew darker, Daniel made a silent promise. If the shadows wanted a war, then he would not run. He would fight, not just for himself, but for everyone who had been taken, everyone who had been silenced. For humanity. The city lights outside Daniel's apartment flickered in the distance, casting long shadows that danced along the walls. For the first time, Daniel understood how fragile life was. The shadows had already tested him, but the attacks were growing bolder. Lyra had warned him. Tonight it would not be a simple test. Daniel, Lyra said, standing near the window. Her calm voice carried a sharp edge. They are moving beyond testing. They are targeting key humans tonight. Scientists, engineers, chosen individuals. Daniel clenched his fists. You mean, they're attacking people like me? Lyra nodded. Yes, if they remove enough leaders, humanity's defense collapses before it begins. Daniel swallowed. He had spent nights training his mind, learning to resist the whispers, learning to see the shadows before they struck. But this was different. This was a strike, a coordinated attack, and tonight he would see it firsthand. The first warning came as a siren, soft, almost hidden beneath the usual hum of city life. Daniel recognized it immediately. Not a normal emergency alarm, but a sentinel alert. Lyra had activated it, signaling that the network of protected humans was under attack. "They've started," she said, her eyes scanning the street. "You must be ready." Daniel followed her to the study. She opened the hidden compartment again, pulling out a small device, a scanner that glowed faintly with blue light. "This will help you locate the intruders," she explained. "You cannot fight blindly. They move between walls and shadows, but they leave a trace. Focus and you will see them." Daniel nodded, trying to steady his breathing. He gripped the device and felt the first wave of tension rising like electricity in his chest. Outside, the city had changed. What had been normal streets now felt hollow, almost unreal. Figures moved in the alleys, shifting forms that didn't quite belong. Shadows stretched unnaturally, crawling along walls like living smoke. Daniel and Lyra moved through the streets, silent, alert, using the scanner to track disturbances in the environment. Each blip on the device marked a shadow, a potential threat. "They are faster than last time," Lyra whispered. "You must keep your mind clear. Confusion is what they want." Daniel's heart pounded. He remembered last night, the whispers, the cold touch on his thoughts. But now he was different. He focused, blocking the fear, letting the training take over. The first encounter came suddenly. A shadow lunged from the corner of a building, stretching arms that twisted unnaturally. Daniel raised his hand, holding the scanner like a weapon. The blue light flared, striking the shadow. It shrieked, writhing, but didn't disappear completely. "Now," Lyra shouted. She moved with speed that was almost impossible for a human. Her hand glowed with energy, and she struck the shadow, sending it collapsing into a puddle of darkness on the ground. Daniel watched, heart racing. He had never seen anything like this. The shadows weren't just invisible threats, they were dangerous, alive, and intelligent. "They will come back," Lyra said, breathing heavily. "They always do. But you did well. Your focus weakened their hold." Daniel nodded, though his hand still shook. "What now?" Lyra's eyes scanned the streets. "Now we protect the others. Tonight you are not just resisting, you are leading." They moved through the city, heading to locations marked on Lyra's map. Each place had a human chosen for protection. Daniel's role was to guard, to observe, and when necessary, to fight. The first site was a small laboratory on the outskirts of the city. Inside, a scientist sat at a terminal typing, unaware of the danger creeping closer. A shadow slithered along the wall, aiming to take the man. Daniel acted first. He reached the terminal and held the scanner up. The shadow recoiled at the light, but then lunged. Daniel shouted, focusing all his energy. He could feel the shadow trying to enter his mind, whispering, testing, weakening, but he remembered Lyra's words. "Clarity is strength." He centered himself, blocked the whispers, and let the scanner pulse its energy. The shadow shrieked again, retreating into the darkness. Lyra entered the room, her movements precise. She struck the shadow with her glowing hand, sending it dissolving into nothing. The scientist looked up, terrified but unharmed. Daniel breathed heavily. "One down," Lyra nodded, "and more will come." As they moved to the next site, Daniel noticed something strange. The shadows weren't random. They moved with purpose, almost like a hive. Each attack seemed coordinated, as if they knew where the chosen humans were. "They are learning," Daniel said. "From each strike they adapt." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Yes, and that is why you must act quickly. If they succeed in removing several humans, our defenses will weaken. Humanity's future depends on tonight." The next encounter was more dangerous. A shadow entered a crowded street, and Daniel could see the panic in people's eyes. He tried to warn them, but they didn't understand. Lyra grabbed his arm, pulling him into an alley. "They will not hurt the masses," she said. "They only want the chosen. Stay focused." Daniel clenched his jaw. He followed her, scanning the streets with the device. A shadow moved ahead, tall and thin, its body flickering in and out of visibility. "You go left," Lyra whispered. "I will go right. We strike together." They split, moving silently through the streets. Daniel's mind was razor-sharp, every sense alert. The shadow moved closer, its whispers slithering into his thoughts. "Give up, you cannot fight. You are ours," Daniel gritted his teeth. "No, I am not yours." The shadow lunged, faster than he expected. Daniel swung the scanner, the blue pulse hitting it. The shadow screamed, twisting, but held its form. Then Lyra appeared, striking with energy from both hands. The shadow collapsed, writhing violently before dissolving into nothing. Daniel exhaled, his chest heaving. This is insane. Lyra's gaze swept the street. And it will get worse. But tonight we survive. That is victory enough. By midnight, the city had become a battlefield. Shadows appeared everywhere, attempting to strike at the chosen humans. Daniel and Lyra moved like phantoms, striking quickly, resisting the mental attacks and protecting those who could not defend themselves. Daniel began to feel a strange sense of confidence. Every strike, every shadow defeated made him stronger. He was no longer just a man reacting, he was leading, making decisions, coordinating attacks with Lyra. In one alley, a group of shadows attempted to trap him and Lyra. They moved together, testing their limits. Daniel raised the scanner, sending pulses of light. Lyra struck from the side, energy connecting with his own. Together, they pushed the shadows back. Do you feel it? Lyra asked. Daniel nodded. We're learning them. They're not invincible. No, Lyra said. But remember, they adapt. And they will return. Finally, the first strike ended. The city was quiet again. The shadows gone, leaving only faint marks on walls, scratched symbols, and a lingering cold in the air. Daniel leaned against a wall, exhausted. He had fought shadows, resisted mental attacks, protected civilians, and survived. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Lyra approached him. You did well, Daniel. You led tonight. You protected lives. That is the first victory in a long war. Daniel nodded slowly. He looked at the city around him, the buildings bathed in dim moonlight. The streets were quiet now, but he knew it wouldn't last. Lyra, he said, voice low. They'll be back stronger, smarter, and more of them. They will, Lyra agreed. But now you know you can face them. Humanity can face them, and with you leading, we stand a chance. Daniel swallowed hard. For the first time, he felt something he hadn't felt before. Determination. The shadows were dangerous, the attacks terrifying, but he was no longer afraid. He had seen the enemy, fought them, and survived. Daniel Rios stood at the edge of the rooftop, wind tugging at his clothes as he watched the city below. The night was dark, but the faint glow of streetlights revealed movement, shadows. The enemy had returned. This time there were more of them. Larger, faster, smarter. They didn't just appear in random corners anymore. They moved with precision, coordinating their attacks. It was as if the entire city was a chessboard, and the shadows were playing several moves ahead. Lyra stood beside him, calm as ever, though her eyes glimmered with alertness. They've learned since last night. Tonight will be harder. You must remain focused. Daniel nodded. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. This was no longer about survival. This was about humanity. If the shadows succeeded tonight, countless humans marked for protection could be taken. Their knowledge, their abilities, their very lives, gone. He adjusted the scanner in his hand, feeling the blue energy pulse against his palm. It was more than a weapon. It was a lifeline. With it, he could see the shadows before they struck, anticipate their movements, and fight back. But this night he would have to lead others. The first encounter came almost immediately. Shadows slithered from the alleyways, forming long, thin shapes that darted between buildings. Daniel shouted instructions through the small communicator built into his device. Sector 1. Protect the scientist. Sector 2. Form a perimeter around the civilians. From hidden corners, other humans selected by the Sentinel program responded, guided by the blue signals from the scanners. For the first time, Daniel realized that the government had not just placed him here to survive. They had placed him here to lead. Lyra moved beside him, striking shadows with precise energy pulses. Daniel mirrored her movements, coordinating attacks with the other humans. The streets became a battlefield. Shadows collided with human defenders, energy clashing against darkness. Daniel fought fiercely, his mind sharp, his focus unbroken. Each shadow that lunged at him tried to whisper into his thoughts, to pull him down into fear and confusion, but he resisted. With every pulse of light from the scanner, he pushed them back, striking a rhythm of hope into the chaos. This way, he shouted. Noticing a shadow attempting to flank the defenders, he sprinted down a side street with Lyra close behind, intercepting the attack. Together they crushed the shadow in a blinding burst of blue energy. Daniel's heart pounded, but he didn't pause. Every second counted. Every shadow he defeated was another life saved. The battle continued for hours. Shadows emerged from unexpected places, Subway tunnels, abandoned buildings, even the rooftops above them. Daniel's team worked as one unit now, following his guidance, reacting with precision. Lyra moved like a phantom, appearing where needed, striking with deadly accuracy. Daniel began to notice a pattern. The shadows were forming ranks, almost like soldiers. They weren't just testing anymore, they were organized, planning a strike against the city's strongest points. "They're targeting the leadership," Lyra said, her eyes scanning the streets below. "Scientists, engineers, thinkers. The ones humanity depends on." Daniel clenched his fists. "Not on my watch. They will not take them." He sent instructions through the communicator again, directing teams to protect key locations. His mind was a flurry of strategy, yet he remained calm. The shadows tried to invade his thoughts, but the weeks of training had made him resilient. With every attack repelled, Daniel grew more confident. He was no longer the engineer hiding behind machines. He was a leader, a protector, and a symbol of resistance. The climax came near the city's central hub. Shadows had gathered in overwhelming numbers, forming a wall of darkness that seemed impossible to penetrate. Daniel and Lyra approached cautiously, scanning for weaknesses. "This is it," Daniel said, voice low but steady. "If we break through here, we break their plan." Lyra nodded. "But it will cost energy. You must focus entirely on the moment." Daniel took a deep breath, steadying his mind. The shadows noticed him immediately, rushing forward like a tide of black smoke. He raised the scanner, sending a pulse of blue light that split the approaching masses. Lyra struck alongside him, her energy cutting through the darkness. For a moment, the battle seemed hopeless. Shadows pressed on from all sides, whispering into his mind, attacking the weaker defenders. Panic threatened to rise, but Daniel forced it down. He focused on the rhythm of the scanner, the flow of energy, the movements of his team. "Strike together," he shouted. "Now!" The defenders unleashed a coordinated attack. Blue pulses erupted, synchronized with Lyra's strikes. Shadows screamed and twisted violently, struggling against the combined force. Daniel felt their whispers clawing at his mind, trying to pull him down, but he held firm. Then, with a final push, a massive surge of energy from Daniel and Lyra collided with the largest shadow in the center. The entity writhed, shrieked, and dissolved into nothingness, leaving a ripple in the air that faded slowly. The rest of the shadows scattered, retreating into the darkness, leaving the city in stunned silence. Daniel sank to the ground, exhausted but exhilarated. Around him, the defenders began to check on civilians, scientists, and engineers. Everyone was alive, saved by their coordination and his leadership. Lyra approached, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You did it. Tonight you led humanity's defense." Daniel shook his head, still breathing heavily. "We did it. All of us, but they'll come back, stronger." Lyra's eyes softened. "Yes, but they will remember tonight. They will remember that humans can resist, that humans can fight as one." Daniel stood, looking over the city. The first strike had been devastating, terrifying, but humanity had survived. Against creatures that existed beyond normal perception, against shadows that could twist minds, humans had stood and fought, and they had won. The next morning, Daniel returned to his apartment. The city was quiet again, but he knew it was only temporary. He opened the hidden compartment in the study, scanning through the Sentinel files. Reports had been updated, casualties minimal, defenses strengthened, the network of chosen humans coordinated successfully. Daniel felt a strange pride. Humanity had faced an invisible enemy and survived, not because of weapons or numbers, but because of courage, coordination, and clarity of mind. Lyra appeared behind him. "You see now, Daniel, this is why you were chosen. Your resistance, your focus, your ability to lead, these are qualities they cannot overcome easily." Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand now. This is bigger than me, bigger than any one person, humanity. We're stronger than we thought." Lyra smiled faintly. "Yes, and together we will continue to fight. We are not alone, and neither is humanity." Daniel looked out the window at the city stretching endlessly before him. The streets that had been battlegrounds now seemed peaceful, almost ordinary. But he knew better. He had seen the shadows, fought them, and survived, and he had a promise to keep. Humanity would never bow to the unseen. They would never surrender. The war was far from over, but for the first time, Daniel felt hope. They had faced the darkness and proven that humans could fight, resist, and lead, and that was the answer the shadows could not predict. Weeks passed and life slowly returned to a new normal. Daniel continued his work as an engineer, but now he carried the weight of leadership. He trained other humans, preparing them for future attacks. The city remained vigilant and the Sentinel program expanded quietly, its guardians ready. Lyra remained by his side, ever watchful. Not just as a housekeeper, but as a protector, a guide, and a friend. One evening, as Daniel stood watching the sunset from his rooftop, Lyra joined him. The sky was painted in orange and purple, the city calm beneath them. "You did well," she said. Daniel smiled faintly. "No, we did well. Humanity did well. We just needed someone to lead and someone to guide. That's all." Lyra's eyes glimmered. "Leadership and guidance are rare, Daniel. But you possess both. And the shadows know it now." He looked out over the city again. Somewhere out there, the shadows waited. But Daniel no longer felt fear. He had faced them, resisted them, and survived. Humanity would fight, and humanity would win. With Lyra at his side and the Sentinel network ready, Daniel understood the truth. The enemy could test, could strike, could whisper into human minds, but they could never break the will of people determined to defend themselves. As night fell over the city, Daniel whispered quietly, more to himself than anyone else, "We are ready."